Apparently those clocks aren't adjusted to daylight savings time. Did some of you have a 7 o'clock class this morning? What?
It's not you.
Oh, wait a minute.
That was my laptop.
Oh, that was your laptop. Oh. Oh, no problem. I thought it came out of my computer. I thought, how did that happen? Maybe I don't have to teach this class. Just walk out and it's already done. That'd be cool. All right, no problem, Miriam. All right, let's have a word of prayer and we'll get started. Thank you, Father, for your blessing and protection over break. Thank you for giving the chorale stamina despite all the illness that was a part of their experience. Thank you that you waste nothing in our life to teach us and make us more like the Lord. And I pray that as we pursue these clusters in the last part of the semester, you give us a really good study together and help us to learn and grow. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Okay, we have been talking about 10 what in the first part of the semester? I hope you'll remember at least something about this because that was the whole half of the semester. 10 what? Yeah, values, and they used, at least the Cultural Intelligence Center used to call them cultural dimensions, but they've kind of shifted, as we said, more to the terminology that's more common out there, cultural values. Okay, good. Dare we try to name them just to get the cobwebs pulled off without looking? Can we name what those 10, somebody give me one of them. What's the most basic one, the first one? That's not fair after spring break. What's the first one, the one that's kind of foundational for all the others? Do you remember what it's composed of? You got it, Emma?
Identity.
Yeah, identity, right, which is composed of? Okay, collectivistic or individualistic, group or, yeah, individual. Mm-hmm. Good. What's another one? Time. And we divide that up. Okay, that's part of it, monochronic versus polychronic, all right. Yep, and or punctuality versus people or events, or yeah, okay. What's another one? Yeah.
Authority.
Authority, which would be? Right. What else? Yeah.
Individualistic cultures versus collective.
Right, now that's the identity one. That falls under identity. Right, but you're right. Good. Give me another one. Okay, risk.
High uncertainty, avoidance.
Good. All right. Another one. I didn't warn you I was going to do this to you.
Forget.
No, that's not one of them.
Showing emotion and not showing
So what do we call that? Expressiveness. And it's, what are the two categories? The neutral and the affective, affections, right, emotions. Another one. Achievement, all right. And what are the two?
Cooperative and competitive.
Yeah. Cooperative and competitive. Good. Another one.
social norms.
Okay, social norms or cultural norms, and those would be, what are the two? Tight versus loose. Yep. There's another big one we haven't hit. They're all important, but.
Lifestyle.
Okay, lifestyle.
Risk. Being and doing.
Being and doing cultures. Okay. There's at least one more. I'm not counting, but there's at least one more. What am I doing right now? Communication, right? We divide it up by direct and indirect, or high context and low context. Another way, yeah. Did we miss any of them? Did we get them all? Good. Let's go back, just double check. Well, I can't even find the page. Did anybody think of one we missed? Let's see. Oh, yeah. Yeah, rules, which are particularist and universalist. Right. Good. And I think we mentioned all the other. All right. So what are we doing now? Okay, those values are values that are part of any culture. Anywhere you go in the world, you will find all 10 of those in some form. Okay? What we're going to do now is shift to a geographic consideration of cultures. And as you can see, we call these clusters. Most, in fact, all of them involve a number of countries, a group of countries. One of them, in fact, Miriam, is the cluster you're from, has the smallest number of countries in it, okay? But most of them have more. One of those clusters actually involves 3 geographic regions in the world, okay? My memory serves me right. All of the other 9 are countries that are packed together, but one of them actually involves 3 different regions, okay? And so we'll take a look at those. Let me get to, so we're looking at, so when you think of clusters, think of regions, okay, geographic. This is something that I think this is not in your notes, okay? We went through this before. Remember this from the beginning of the semester? The reason it's here is because a few years ago, I added this, and I added it in the middle of the semester, so I put it here. But I thought, well, let's leave it because it makes a good review. Just keep in mind that we're studying cultural anthropology, which is one of 4. Archaeological, which deals with artifacts to help us know how people live. Biological is more the ethnic part, and linguistic, of course, is languages. So all of those together really, I mean, if somebody's going to be a serious anthropologist, he really is going to want to dabble in all 4 of those, and we're just focusing on this one this semester, okay? So anyway, all right. Now, I told this story before, okay, in the classroom, and you remember the story about the little boy in the Japanese school, and the teacher brings him up front, you know, and tells him to draw a polygon, and he tries, and she asks the class, did he get it right? And they all say no, and so try it again. Remember, there's a visitor from the West who's there, and this little boy is just getting seemingly more and more nervous, and he keeps trying it and doesn't get it, and the guy in the back is wondering, why are they embarrassing this poor kid? This is a form of cruelty, of abuse even. And in the United States, a teacher could even be sued for abusing a child by bringing him up and publicly making a spectacle of him. But eventually he gets it, everybody claps, he's happy, he sits down, and they have achieved. And what's the big word for collectivistic cultures? What have they achieved? Right, social harmony, exactly. And so anyway, that's number 1, the interesting story about the classroom. 2 questions that arise from that video clip. And again, you guys understand we don't watch all those because they can mess up our recordings. A, why do Japanese systems promote struggle? And that's an interesting word because that's what's going on. That little boy is struggling publicly. And the U.S. sees it as inferior intelligence. Why do Japanese systems promote struggle? And then letter B, why do cultures do what they do? Okay, that's a question we've been asking all along. Why are cultures different? One of the main goals of this course has been and continues to be to help us think beyond ourselves. Remember that we all act 90% of the time subconsciously because we simply do what we've been raised to do, what we're used to doing. So part of the purpose of this course is to help us come out of that and realize we're not just doing things but there is a reason behind them, and the way we do them is not necessarily the right way for everybody else. Okay? Number 3, let me see if I got these on here. Okay, yeah, letter A, struggle. B, do what they, what do we mean when we say, well, the U.S. sees this as inferior intelligence? The U.S., and again, this is a stereotypical statement, when some cultures actually promote struggle because they think that's part of bringing everybody together into a harmonious one, some of the Western countries would tend to look at that as being barbaric. You know, we need to be more sophisticated in the way we teach people in order to bring them up, you know, humanely and avoid any kind of embarrassment and awkwardness. And so a lot of cultures view that as the more intelligent approach to training people, whereas other cultures say, no, they need a bit of struggle. Now, let me ask you this, just looking at that. Biblically, how does God go about bringing us to Christ-likeness? Is struggle a part of that? Yeah. Does God allow us to experience awkwardness and discomfort in order to make us like Christ? Yes. Is that barbaric? Well, obviously, we would have to answer that no. So, but God doesn't always do it that way. He uses other ways as well. Okay. So, number 3, psychologists ask the 2 following questions. Is the word ask corrected there? I was asked. Is there a K in the word ask there? Okay, we got that straight. People who are, when we use the word psychologist here, we're talking about people who study the way that cultures think and behave, okay? And so there are 2 questions, and these are not difficult questions. 1, how do your beliefs, values, and assumptions influence the way you behave? There are people, for example, who will tell you, if you go to another culture, that the reason you are a Christian is because you come from a Christian culture. Now, would they be right or wrong? You are a Christian because you grew up in a Christian culture. If you'd grown up in India or China, you would not be a Christian because those are not Christian cultures. Are they right or wrong? Paul?
Yeah, they're right for that.
They're right? So here's a follow-up question. Is it right for us to penetrate cultures that are not Christian in order to try to win converts for Christ there? Now, you know the theological answer to that question. Yeah, Delaney?
Well, I just think it's a loaded question because the way you become a Christian is through hearing something
Okay.
and accepting it. And so if you're in a culture where you don't have the opportunity to hear it, you're not going to accept it. But at the same time, not everyone who grows up in a Christian culture becomes a Christian. So that can't be the only cause.
Okay.
And so in that case, it's not the culture that makes you Christian. Introducing Christianity into a culture won't make everyone in the culture.
Okay. And you understand that when I say Christian culture, I'm talking about a culture influenced by Christian principles. Nobody in this room is going to say that the United States is a Christian nation. Well, you might, but it's definitely a Christian nation in the sense that it is heavily influenced by Christian principles in its history. Okay. All right. Yeah, it is a bit of a loaded question, Delaney. You're right. And the fact is, the Great Commission does command us and expect us to be countercultural in that sense. Now, there's a lot of discussion out there about what it means to be countercultural. How much should churches try to blend into their cultures, and how much should they purposely try to be distinct, different from their cultures? Okay? But when I use the word countercultural in this context, I'm saying that we are expected to take the gospel of Christ to cultures that have little or no Christian influence in their history and take them the gospel of Christ. Okay? That's the idea. Okay. B, how does your culture cause you to have those assumptions and beliefs? There are lots of people in our country who have grown up in a context that has a lot of Christian influence, and yet they never become believers in the Lord Jesus Christ. So, Delaney, I think part of your statement was just because they grew up in Christian culture doesn't mean they're going to become Christians. I don't remember, but that idea, and that is true. And so those are questions, that are searching. They can create discussions, but they're valid questions. Anthropologists, those who study cultural anthropology the way that we're doing it here, ask these questions. One, how do people survive here? Now, why would an anthropologist ask the question, how do people survive here? Why is that question important? Seems like kind of an odd question, doesn't it? How do you survive in your culture? Why is that a key question for someone studying anthropology to ask? Yeah.
It's like looking in the habits of each culture, not only like how they survive, like actually if they're like more agricultural or like, but also like how they, even like how much personal space they need or like from other people, and it's kind of like how they function within.
Okay, yeah, we do ask all those questions about personal space and how people function, but what I'm asking is, why is the issue of survival important here? In other words, what is it about surviving that makes the study of a particular culture important? Because people can survive with different kinds of power distance and all that, but what is it about survival? Yeah, Paul?
Could it be their, like, how do they eat, what they eat? Because if someone else eats what they eat or the water they drink can affect other person. Example I can give is if an American goes to an Africa country and just drinks a river water, that person might be sick, and will be asking, how do these people survive this type of bacteria in your body?
Okay, all right. So part of it might have to do with the way you adjust to your surroundings so you're able to resist disease and things like that. Okay. Yeah. This question has a lot to do with the essentials of a culture. In other words, cultures can give up a lot of things, right? There are lots and lots of things in our culture that we could live without, and other cultures as well. So when we ask the question, how do people survive, we're really getting down to the essential elements of existence. What is it that enables these people to go on as a culture? So we're asking the question, what are the non-negotiables? What do these people have to have in order to survive? And the answer to that question is going to be different in different cultures, okay? So that's kind of the idea here. Letter B, what are the mechanisms these people have developed to cope with life in this environment? So if you're living in Siberia, for example, okay, you're going to need to develop mechanisms of survival that people who live in South America, where it's the opposite climate, won't need. And so when you study cultures, you ask, what are the mechanisms? So Paul, you talk about water, for example. So what are some of the means by which people treat water, okay, in certain cultures in order to ensure that they remain healthy and survive, okay? Transportation. What modes of transportation does a culture use in order to exist, to get where it needs to go? We're going to talk about one very large cluster a little later in the semester where mobility is everything because of conflicts and wars and because of climatic conditions. These people in their history had to move, at least twice a year. Mobility became a mechanism that was necessary for their survival. Okay, so that's another important question that people ask. How do people get along? How does their culture perpetuate itself? How do they survive? And then what are the mechanisms that they have used in order to make that survival possible? These are the kinds of questions that are asked. All right, Number 4, or 5, I guess, anthropological cultural categories. If you had to boil down, what are the essential categories that have to be considered in order to, in other words, for a culture to survive, what are the categories that are absolutely necessary? In any culture, what 4 categories do you have to have in order to survive? Here they are, okay? What would be okay, give me one. You can't survive without food, okay? So number 1 is food. Every culture in the world has to consider food, okay? Now, where we live, how do you resolve this issue? You go to the grocery. You go to Aldi, you go to Hy-Vee, you go to Fairway, you go. We don't think a lot about this because food, really, in our reality, has not been an issue. I mean, maybe somebody here has been there, I don't know, but, when's the last time you were in a position where, you weren't sure where your next meal was going to come from? Most of us have probably not experienced that. Or if you have, maybe it's a very unusual situation. So for us, if I don't know what I'm going to do for lunch today, it becomes a crisis, even though I can get along easily for, until supper time or until breakfast the next morning. But other cultures, that this is a day-by-day occurrence. Survival becomes a daily issue of coming up with the food I'm going to need to feed myself and my family. Okay? So in some cultures, hunting is hunting is more independent. What do we mean by that? In a lot of cultures, people hunt for their food so they can feed themselves and their family. So they actually become more independent. In other words, they can't go to the store and buy something like you and I can. They have to go out, each man, on behalf of his family, and find the food they're going to have for today, tomorrow, or whatever. Farming, by and large, is more collective. Okay, who here grew up on a farm? Anybody? Farmers here. Okay. Farming, and that's because normally farming is something that requires more people in order to make it happen. Farming is complicated. It takes a lot of hands to get the work done. So when we study cultures, were these cultures whose background was more that of hunting or farming? Now, in the United States, which is it? Is the background of our country more a hunting or a farming background? Farming? Okay, I'm sorry, okay? And, yeah, farming. Now, at the very, very beginning of our country, you see a lot of hunting, right? People going out and learning how to hunt. So there's a sense in which both have actually been true of our background. There has been a hunting background, but then as we grew, then farming became more and more a part of our reality, all right? In number 3, if the U.S. is more individualistic, why do we have an agricultural background? You're right, Ella. In general, even though the pioneers that came to our country had to go out and shoot their food, and stuff to survive, it wasn't long before they started clearing land in order to farm. Okay, and the Indians, the natives taught them how to do corn and other things like that. So how would you answer this question? If the U.S. is more individualistic, and we are, why do we have an agricultural background if agricultural seems to be more of a collectivistic concept? Justin?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of time it just fit the situation better to farm, and then I feel like you can still have some of that individualistic value. Like, a lot of people like the farm because it's something they built with their hands and it's something they did.
Okay. So maybe we should say that farming is not necessarily just a collectivistic idea. There's some individualistic elements in that as well. By the way, why are we talking about collectivistic and individualistic? Remember, that is the foundational. The identity one seems to impact everything. Has our country always been individualistic, or at the beginning were we more collectivistic? Delaney?
Maybe at the very, very beginning, when we were founded by a religious group, more towards becoming a country, you became more individualistic?
Yeah, I think you're right. At the beginning, when people came over, they were bound to religious groups, Puritans, separatists, right? If you studied your American history, and that is true. There was a more collectivistic flavor to our country early on. What happened in our country that really drove us to be more individualistic? How did that actually begin to really generate? Where do you see Americans becoming much more individualistic than collectivistic? Yeah, Justin.
The war for independence.
Okay, now, as a nation, it made us more independent as a nation from Great Britain. But there's a certain sense also, which you could say that the Revolutionary War brought us together, right? It really bound us together as a people, right? In that sense. But nationally speaking, you're right. It made us independent of foreign control. Yeah.
Maybe the westward expansion.
Yeah. The westward expansion in our country really generated an individualistic idea. Okay, go west, young man. Notice the individualistic. Miriam, I don't know if you're familiar with that. There was a statement very popular, back then. Go west, young man. It was the idea of getting, but man is singular there, and that was the idea. You can go and make a life for yourself, and people did that. So moving west, going west. I am directionally challenged. Is that west? I think so. Going west really did heighten the individualistic nature of our country. So I do think that we started off more collectivistic and became more individualistic because of that. We have to look further back to that which was part of the survival code of our ancestors in Europe. Now, okay, this is another interesting angle. If you want to ask, why are Americans the way they are? You can't just go back to the colonial period in our country. You have to step back to where they came from. That's true in any country, okay? And by the way, Miriam, I'm listening to a series right now on the history of the English language, and I was not aware of how much influence German had on English. I should have known that, but I probably was daydreaming in English class when I was a kid, or maybe I was never taught that. But I was amazed how much German and French, and Old English, contribute. So anytime you're looking at a cultural cluster and you're asking, why are they the way they are? You have to try to, if you really want to get to the bottom of it, you got to go back and ask, where did they come from? Even before they settled in that place. And America is one of the youngest nations on planet Earth. This may sound really weird to you, but I have lived 1/4 of America's history. America is 246 years old. Is that right this year? Or wait, 6? Yeah, no, 7? I don't know. I'm 62. Do the math. I've lived about 1/4 of American history. We're a very, very young nation. So if you're going to understand America, you've got to go back to who we were. So where do you go? If you're going to go back and look at Americans' roots, where do you go? You go to Europe primarily. Yeah. England's a big one. Okay. Germany. You could name almost any Western European country, and there's American influence from there. Right. If I'm going to study Latin American history, Brazil, Peru, okay, where do I go? You can name 2 countries to get most of it. Portugal and Spain. Portugal for Brazil, Spain for pretty much the rest of Latin America. So depending on how deep you're going to go, if God takes you to another place in the world, that is a legitimate question. Why do we call Latin America? Because of its Latin European roots. That's where the word Latin comes from. A lot of people, when they think of Latin America, they don't make that connection between, the Latin there and the Latin European roots. So, just how far you want to dig. All right. Economics, letter B, is another big element. I said 4. I don't know how to count. There are 6 of them. How to change goods. By the way, what does the word economics mean? Don't say money. What is at the root of the word economics or economy? Have you studied the meaning of the word itself?
Is it more of a choice of life?
It does involve a choice of life. I'm thinking of the actual meaning of the word itself, economics or economy. It's related to the Greek word for stewardship, same where we get our word dispensation from, okay? It's the idea of stewarding the resources that you have. And so, let me ask you this. Has money always existed in the world? Has there always been money? Depends on how you define money, right? When we think of the word money, we think of, currency, we call it, right? Currency. But we can have a lot of fun with this. Why do we call currency currency? Because currency moves. The idea of currency is something you're exchanging. It's constantly moving, right? But the fact is, from the very earliest times, the concept of money has existed. Because what is at the root of money? When you think of money, what is really the brass tacks root of money? The idea.
It's like something of value.
Yeah, it's something of value. And see the word exchange there? The idea of trading with people. I have something you need, you have something I need, so we make a trade. Okay, and I decide how much I give you and how much you give me in order to be fair, right? And that has been going on since the beginning of human history. Give me an early example in the Bible of trade. Really early. Yeah, Jacob and Esau. He wants a birthright. He's going to give it now. Was that a fair trade? No. These guys didn't know much about economy, did they, back then? I don't know. They might have. And remember, even by the time you get to Jacob and Esau, where are you? You're already probably at least a couple thousand years into human history. Okay? So the idea of economy, money, is all based on exchanging, trading, in order for people to survive. Interaction, okay? That's the idea. It's a fascinating study, but that is one of the things that you study when you're trying. Why do some countries have inflation rates like they do, and other countries are more stable? All these questions relate to economics. All right, here, offspring. How do people reproduce? How to regenerate self and integrate people into society. So really you're talking about 2 things here. First of all, how do they have babies? You say, well, wait a minute, doesn't everybody have babies the same way? Yeah, I'm not so much talking about that, but what processes, what cultural norms lead up to that? How many cultures in the world believe in marriage as a prerequisite to having offspring? The fact of the matter is, most cultures in the world believe in the concept of a union of a man and woman in marriage in some sort of civil ceremony preceding offspring. Isn't that interesting? And what is our country doing right now? It is fighting tooth and nail, okay, to defy that. And now it's not even right in the LGBTQ plus community to say that women have babies. No, we talk about pregnant people. We're not supposed to even say pregnant women. I mean, it's absolutely insane what's going on. If you follow that at all, it is mind-boggling. There are times I have to shut it off just to keep myself together. We have lost our marbles, our moral marbles, our spiritual marbles. We are losing it as a nation. And if you look around the world, you find that historically and even globally, the idea of offspring has had this common element, okay? And how do you integrate people into society? Most cultures worldwide have the concept of parents preparing their children to live in society. Now, how that's done and when the child is ready depends on the culture. But the bottom line is most cultures have that idea. A man and woman come together in some sort of a union, okay? And when they have children, they're responsible to raise them up to some point in some way to prepare them to go on. That's universal, okay? Even though it's been challenged, it's a universal. Laws and government, letter D, laws and government. How do you control society? Give me some of the names of general concepts of governing that exist in our world today. What do we call them? Give me some names. Ways, systems of government. What's one? What do you call the American system of government? Okay. What would you say?
Democratic.
Okay, good. You put two important words together, democratic republic, right? And speaking of history, did you know if you really want to understand what's behind the idea of a democratic republic in our country, you have to go back in history to where? If you really want to get to the bottom of it. Where did the idea of democratic rule, of involving people in decision making, come from? You could probably, what's that? Greece. Yeah, now I realize there are probably other places you could go as well, okay? But Athens, Athenian Greece, 400-500 BC, is what our founding fathers did in this country involved a whole lot of influence by Athens, Greece. You got to go halfway around the world in order to study the roots of that. That's just the way it is, okay? Give me another system of government. Okay, dictatorship, which you could also call the idea of being in charge of everything. Pardon? Okay, tyranny. I'm thinking of the word totalitarian, which is the idea of a dictatorship. Okay, totalitarian means that one person or small group of people control the totality of the government. They decide everything, the morals, the spiritual, religious, everything. Can you give me another one? Socialist. Okay, now socialist falls somewhere, the democratic on one end of the extreme, the continuum, and totalitarian on the other end. Well, actually, okay, let me back up a second. If you have totalitarian on one extreme, what would be the logical other extreme of that? Yeah, what'd you say? Anarchy, which means no rule. So that's, yeah. And now, do you think there exists any country in the world where anarchy is the order of the day? The answer is no. Anarchy cannot survive, okay? But those would be the two extremes, philosophically speaking. So democracy would be closer to, well, to involving everybody, there'd be an interesting subject to plot these where they go. Socialism would tend more toward the side of totalitarianism because even though socialism speaks of a rule where everybody's equal and it sounds very collectivistic, in the end, it really becomes the control of a few, an oligarchy, normally a small group that controls everybody. The purpose of this class is not to study politics, but you can't study cultures without involving politics. You just can't. Brazil, for example, where I served, okay, they had a president the last time around. His name was Bolsonaro. You may have heard his name somewhere on the news. Some called him the Trump of Brazil because he was very outspoken, although he was a little bit more careful, I think, with his words maybe than Trump was, but that's up for debate. So what happens? He finishes his term, and Brazil has an election, and they re-elect a guy named Lula, L-U-L-A, who had been the president of Brazil before, back when I was still there. Well, Lula, after he served 2 terms of office, okay, was put in prison for political crimes. Well, he got out of prison, and he's re-elected now, and he's president of Brazil again. I mean, welcome to Brazil. I'll just say Brazil, but it's true in other places too. But okay, so And when Bolsonaro was in office in Brazil, he lifted the visa regulation for Americans. He said, we're friends with America. We want to encourage American interaction with our country. So all you needed to go to Brazil was a passport. Last week, I got an email from a colleague in Brazil that says, Lula's back in office, and guess what? He has reinstated the visa requirement for Americans. Okay? Now, you understand, there's a lot of money that goes into this, okay? Visas cost money. See, Bolsonaro's idea was we open it up for Americans to come in, make it easy. So they come in, they bring their dollars, they invest in our country, and it's good for us. And Lula is thinking more, no, we make money on visas and it gives us more control. See, so all of those things have to be considered. If you're going to go to and minister in another country, you have to understand something about the way that government acts and what kind of an impact that might even have on you. Mobility is another one. How do people move around? Okay. How many of you have a car? You own a car? Okay. How many of you wished you owned a car? All right, look, I'm going to guess that virtually every one of you, by the time you graduate from this place, is going to have a car. If you don't have one of the first things you do when you graduate is you get a car. Why? Because you're on your own, you know? How easy is it to get on a bus here in Ankeny to go downtown Des Moines or go up to Ames or someplace? Bus? To go to Walmart? You're going to go out and stand at a bus stop and wait for a bus to Walmart? You don't see anybody doing that in Ankeny, okay? Even in Des Moines, which is the major city, the capital city, yeah, there are bus stops, but it's not nearly as common. More and more people have their own vehicles, okay? I'm just telling you that we get so used to that, but in other countries, in Germany, do most people own their own car, or do people depend a lot on public transportation where you live?
I think they have a car, but they also depend on public transportation. I think especially for like students in school and university, they usually don't have a car.
Okay, all right. So buses and trains, yeah. Yeah, we think of train here, you think I got to go an hour and a half down to Osceola to catch a train. You know, the Amtrak station is down there. There's a train in Boone, but that's not, you know, this is a huge thing. When I went to Brazil, I got used to the ease. I could get on my phone and call a guy to come up with a motorcycle taxi. And for $1 which was about 50 cents, I can get a ride anywhere in town I needed to. And I came back home. I remember coming home on furlough and thinking, I can't just get on a motor taxi and go downtown. I mean, now I'm used to that. Okay, I don't even think about that. But after 4 years in Brazil, I came back and it kind of scared me at first, like, if I don't have a car, I can't get where I want to go. You know, and that was a little bit unnerving at first. Imagine somebody that lives in a culture that depends on public transportation and then comes here to live and all of a sudden has never been in that situation before. So, you know, mobility, and that's not just moving around now, but even the way, as I said, people sometimes are forced to move from region to region at different times of the year. That's something. All right, and then finally, security. How to protect the society. Now, security is very, very closely tied to letter D, laws and government, because a lot of that has to do with, you know, laws that maintain security and protection. Why do cities survive after devastating circumstances while businesses come and go? That's an interesting question. Well, the reason is cities are built for survival at any cost while businesses are dispensable. Okay? If you build something like a business that you know may not survive for 10 years or 20 years, okay, you're gonna have a whole different attitude toward that than you are a city. You know, nobody expects the city of Ankeny to go belly up in the next 20 years. Okay, Miriam, are you familiar with that term, belly up? Okay, it's a fish. If you have a fish that dies, it goes bloop, and it floats with its belly. So if something dies or you know, ceases to exist, you know, oh yeah, my business was bad, it went belly up. That's the idea. You guys, is that from my generation, or do you guys use that? I have to be, you don't? Oh no, okay, sorry. All right, anyway, so good. All right, so these are all things just to kind of prime the pump. You're thinking about, you know, elements that you study, wherever God takes you. All these things should be on your radar to one degree or another. Thank you, guys. See you all on, we do have class Wednesday, but not Friday. See you then.